Welcome back to the channel, Braves Country. Look, if you're waking up this morning, you need to understand that yesterday was not just a good day for the Atlanta Braves organization, it was a foundational day. It was a day that solidified the legacy of one of the most dominant eras in franchise history, and frankly, one of the most underrated careers in the history of Major League Baseball. We have massive news, we have terrifying news, and we have franchise-defining predictions. So stick with us, because this broadcast covers everything you need to know about the Atlanta Braves news today. Let's start with the monumental, the emotional, the necessary news. Andruw Jones is officially headed to Cooperstown. The Baseball Hall of Fame class of 2026 is set, and our center fielder, the defensive magician, the man who defined an era of Braves baseball, is in. Jones received 333 of the 425 votes cast, just clearing that necessary 75% threshold, and believe me, after years of this debate, years of watching him hover right around that mark, years of arguing with voters who seemed incapable of understanding true, complete baseball talent, this feels like an absolute victory. Now, let's talk about the context. We often talk about offensive numbers, and Jones certainly has them. 434 home runs, 119-33 hits, 289 RBIs. Those are tremendous figures. But the election of Andruw Jones is a win for defense. It is a massive, definitive win for those of us who believe that what happens in center field, what happens defensively, must be weighted equally with offensive output. Think about this. 10 gold gloves. 10. That ties him with Willie Mays for the most by a center fielder. We are talking about true royalty. His fielding percentage closed out at an astonishing 99.2%. He didn't just field the position, he revolutionized it. He took away hits that nobody else in that era could possibly reach. He made the difficult look mundane and the impossible look routine. He was the anchor of those dominant Braves staffs, giving Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz an undeniable security blanket behind them. And let's not forget the sheer longevity of dominance. He burst onto the scene in 1996, played 12 defining seasons right here in Atlanta before heading west. For too long, the narrative around Jones was colored by the tail end of his career, but the Hall of Fame is about peak dominance and sustained excellence, and Andruw Jones delivered both in spades. His induction places him firmly alongside the absolute giants of this organization. It confirms the 90s Braves as one of the truly legendary teams in the sport. Congratulations to Andruw Jones. This was long overdue, and honestly, if you're a Braves fan, this is a moment you need to soak in. Now let's pivot from looking back at history to looking forward at the future. Specifically, the future of our superstar, Ronald Acuna Jr. This is where the hot takes begin. We've seen projections, we've seen the models. But what happens in 2026? What is the real ceiling for Acuna 2 seasons from now? I want to throw out a prediction, and this is going to be controversial, but it's based on 2 key factors: maturity and efficiency. In 2026, Acuna will have fully optimized his base running and strikeout profile. We saw him touch 40-70. Now imagine 50-50. That's right, 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases. Why 50-50 and not another 40-70? Because as players mature, they tend to trade a tiny bit of raw speed for increased power, efficiency, and better pitch selection. I believe he will hit 50 home runs, a mark that has been notoriously difficult for players in this era to consistently reach. He will also maintain a batting average well north of 300, somewhere around 315, and drive in a 130 runs. This isn't just an MVP season. This is potentially a unanimous MVP season that puts him into the conversation for the greatest all-around performance in the modern era. The only thing standing in his way is health, and if he maintains his current conditioning, 2026 could truly be Ronald Acuna Jr.'s defining masterpiece. Let me know in the comments. Are you taking the 50-50 line, or are you projecting something even more historic? All right, let's transition to the news that changes the National League landscape dramatically, and why the Atlanta Braves front office needs to be on high alert. We are talking about market shifts and competitive threats, and the implications of the Ha-Seong Kim injury are massive for Atlanta, even though he doesn't wear a Braves uniform. Kim, a major positional player, is going to miss several months due to a hand injury. This immediately creates a huge void in the market, specifically among teams looking for reliable, high-end infield versatility. Now, why does this matter to the Braves? Two reasons. First, it potentially weakens a competing National League club, depending on where he was slated to land or how his absence impacts the wild card race. Any weakness in the NL helps Atlanta. Second, and perhaps more importantly, an injury of this significance shifts available trade pieces. If other teams were targeting Kim, they now have to pivot. That pivot could lead them directly into the players or positions the Braves are monitoring for mid-season reinforcement. We need to watch the utility infield market closely, because this injury has just thrown the entire trade deadline planning into chaos. The Braves need to be opportunistic and recognize that a competitor's weakness can become our strength, especially if it loosens up a premier defensive replacement or a quality bench bat. But if Kim's injury creates potential opportunities, the next piece of news is an undeniable existential threat to the Braves' dominance in the NL East. We have to talk about the New York Mets. The Mets have just executed a massive blockbuster trade, acquiring outfielder Luis Robert Jr. from the Chicago White Sox. This is a game changer. This is not a subtle move. This is the Mets going all in, throwing down the gauntlet and challenging the Braves dynasty head-on. In exchange, the White Sox received infielder-outfielder Luisangel Acuna, Ronald's brother, and a minor league pitcher. Losing Luisangel Acuna is tough, yes, but the return the Mets get in Robert Jr. is terrifying. Luis Robert Jr. is an absolute superstar, a five-tool player who immediately transforms the Mets lineup into one of the most dangerous, deep lineups in all of baseball. He brings power, speed, and elite defense to Citi Field. If you were counting on the Mets stumbling, if you were relying on the NL East being a two-team race between the Braves and maybe the Phillies, you need to recalibrate your expectations right now. The Mets are serious. They are now legitimate contenders, and they have significantly narrowed the gap that the Braves have enjoyed for the last several seasons. The pressure is officially on. The Braves cannot afford a slump, cannot afford complacency, because their biggest rival just got exponentially better. We need to ask the difficult question: does this Mets acquisition, this massive infusion of star power, threaten the Atlanta Braves championship window? Absolutely, it does. It doesn't close it, but it certainly forces the Braves front office to assess their current roster and ask if they have enough depth, especially in the rotation and the bullpen, to withstand a sustained offensive onslaught from a fully loaded Mets squad. Before we wrap up, a couple of quick MLB notes. Veteran left-handed pitcher Rich Hill, affectionately known as Dick Mountain, has announced his intention not to play in 2026, a long, successful career finally coming to a close. We wish him all the best, a true professional who defied age for years. Also, the Miami Marlins acquired right-handed pitcher Bradley Blaylock from the Colorado Rockies in exchange for minor leaguer Jake Brooks. A minor transaction, but it shows that the bottom of the NL East is still trying to shuffle pieces and find hidden value. But let's be clear, the seismic shift this week came from the Mets, and the historical moment came from Andruw Jones. So, to summarize the Atlanta Braves news today, we celebrate Andruw Jones, we debate a potentially historic 2026 for Acuna, and we look with serious concern at the New York Mets after the Luis Robert Jr. acquisition. What is the Braves' immediate counter-move? That is the insider debate that defines the next 48 hours. Let us know your predictions, your reactions to Jones's induction, and your level of panic regarding the Mets trade. Drop those comments, like the video, and subscribe for all the breaking Atlanta Braves news today.